Hey, I wanted to show you a rather annoying and not completely frustrating alteration because, like you, I'm not actually in quarantine or locked down, but with today's restricted movement and the current price crisis, I'm bored. So I wanted to share this with you. People are asking for more bits. This kilt was brought to me, or was brought to my attention about 10 years ago, actually. An officer of the Seaforth who'd had somebody made it, and I'm going to be charitable and call it a valiant first attempt, because although I understand this other person was an experienced Kiltmaker, I believe he's no longer with us, he clearly hadn't had army training and clearly, pardon me, hadn't done a box pleat before, because I didn't even occur to me to take pictures of how bad this was because it was just too darn depressing to look at. So, but it was unacceptable for parade. So this was brought to me, and basically I took it completely apart, pressed it flat, and I built it up again. Amongst other things, I found that the fellow was a bit of a cheat because he'd been given 8 yards of cloth, or 4 yards of double width, and he'd made up a kilt, and then through whatever convoluted processes of perambulations of his brain that we'll charitably call thought, he only used 6 yards of it and then used the rest to make a waistcoat for him, which is okay, well and good, but actually it's not, because the pleats were very wide, like over an inch at the waist and wider still at the hip, and it's just not a good look for a Seaforth kilt. I mean, the reason why the Seaforths had been known at one time, their nickname was the Silver Streak-it Seaforths, was the pleats at the back were so very narrow that it was quite a profound effect. And I've done the best I can, but the cloth simply isn't here. So I've robbed a pleat on either side. I've sewn the pleats up narrower. There's a couple of spots where we have kind of visual errors, I'm afraid, but this is because I didn't have a seam allowance. He'd cut the cloth very close, and this was absolutely the best I could do. Actually, in a couple of spots, I have patched in pieces to provide a foundation to work with. So, working with 6 yards of cloth, I've managed to, I believe, touch wood, save the situation. So we have the pleats are closer to what we would expect in a Seaforth kilt. They're not to the standard of up until the end of the war, 1947. They're a little bit wider than I'd like, but what I've been able to do. So the aprons have increased in width. We don't have a lot of, we have enough cloth on the inside apron, but on the outside apron, it gets a bit iffy because, as you can see, I've only got that much laying over. So what I did was I went through one of my very big tubs back there, which is full of offcuts and salvaged bits of kilts, which had either been destroyed or worn out or moth-eaten or such. Kept the bits. Most of them will, frankly, there won't be anything more than tartan patches for bonnets, I think. But I did manage to find one piece of cloth, because had I the rest of the samples of the Seaforth cloth, some of which are 70, 80, 100 years old, we would find that many of the sets, the size of the sets, are ever so subtly different. So it's by great good luck that I find that I have one piece that seems to be from the same mill or about the same time, because it's the same size. So what I'm going to do, I have this miserably thin overlap here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew this piece on. It seems to be the ghost of the machine sewn seam there, so I have no idea what this piece of cloth was used for. But we're going to sew this piece on as cleverly as I may, so that it's a hard seam to see on the back of the kilt. I'm also going to put a piece of canvas here to provide additional support for his kilt pin of the Seaforth's regimental pattern. So a bit of canvas there to give that additional support. Sew this as cleverly as I ever can to make this seam as hard to see as possible. So these two together with an overcast seam, and then sew this in the normal fashion with the hidden stitch. And then from there, I'll baste this up, I'll press it, and then rather than the heavy tartan strip, which had been on top of this thing, which was the same weight as this, 22 ounce, and it looked nice, but it provided a double handful of extra volume at the waist, and that's not slimming. So I have the proper 7/8 green twill woolen tape, perfect copy, which has been used by army tailors, particularly certainly in the Highland regiments since at least the 1860s. I've discovered a new source of that, and I'll share it for anyone who wants to have it. So a proper green tape on top. Give it a good press. The original straps and buckles will go on. I'll assess the straps. I may switch out one I may switch out all of them if they're the least bit suspect. And then in will go the lining, and he's chosen the skull pattern, which is always very popular with soldiers. So I'll get this done this week, and yeah, stay healthy, stay safe. This too will pass. So thank you, and carry on.